Welcome once again. Another edition of Quoth Raven, Lewis Bright Raven. It is Friday. That means it's time for movie chat. And joining me once again, my co-host this week is John Figaro Norris.
Hello, everybody.
And we're going to be covering the Max Fleischer Studios Superman cartoons from 1941 and 42, according to the DVD, but it actually ran from 41 to 43. We're going to cover the first half of the first 9 videos tonight, for 2 reasons. One was, even though we both watched all 17 episodes, I didn't have time to write up all the graphics and information on every single episode to do it all in one shot. And the other reason is both of us found a little interesting tidbit. Why don't you go ahead and tell everybody about that?
So we both found out that of the 17 cartoons, only the first 9 were done by the Fleischer brothers, they being Max and Dave Fleischer. After the 9th one, Paramount Pictures, the studio they were working for, fired them, and their studio got folded into another studio called Famous Studios, which produced the remaining Superman cartoons. So in the entire series is collectively known as the Fleischer Superman cartoons, but the actual Fleischer brothers only produced the first 9. So
what we'll do is we'll talk about the first 9 tonight, and then next week we'll come back with the remainder and talk about the differences and stuff like that. So let's go ahead and take a look at our first entry. Episode 1 was called Superman, directed by Dave Fleischer, story by Seymour Neitel and Isidore Sparber, based on Superman by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, produced by Max Fleischer. Starring the voice talents of Bud Collyer, Joan Alexander, Julian Noah, Jack Mercer, and Jackson Beck. Production company was Fleischer Studios, distributed by Paramount Pictures. It was released on September 26, 1941, and had a running time of 10 minutes. The plot of this episode is in the Daily Planet building. Editor Perry White reveals to his 2 best field reporters, Clark Kent and Lois Lane, that an anonymous figure has mailed them yet another threatening note, threatening to use his electro-thanasia ray. I hope I pronounced that right. White assigns Kent to help Lois follow up on her lead about who this mysterious party is, but Lois instead insists that she'd like the chance to crack the story on her own. Lois takes off in a private plane to an undisclosed location at the top of a mountain where the villain's secluded laboratory is located. He is preparing to fire his futuristic weapon until his pet bird spots Lois's aircraft and alerts him. Upon her arrival, Lois is kidnapped, bound, and gagged, and the scientist boasts to her about the success of his plan and then demonstrates the weapon's power by aiming it at a bridge in Metropolis and destroying it. While listening to the radio, Clark and other journalists learn of the coming disaster as the police alert everyone to stay in their homes. Instinctively, Clark rushes to the storage room and changes into Superman before flying off into the night sky. Actually not flying, because at this point he's not flying. He's bounding through the air. The mad scientist fires his weapon at the city with intent to weaken the foundations of the Daily Planet skyscraper. Fortunately, Superman's there, and he prevents this, or does he? We'll get to that in a minute. But he keeps the structure from crashing into neighboring buildings and falling to the ground, and supposedly successfully restores the skyscraper to its upright orientation. Unfortunately, there was no way for him to actually do this, and they show that the foundation is not going to hold, but they never explain how he managed to keep it upright in the actual cartoon. Because when they get down to it, they beat him down at the base, and there's this huge gaping hole at the base of the building, and they don't fix it. But anyway, Superman then pushes the destructive ray away from the base of the skyscraper and attempts to fight it back to the source, but the scientist increases the weapon's power, which also sends erratic pulses of energy towards Superman. However, he remains determined to fight it, persevering against the beam and punching out each pulse as they come, gradually pounding the beam back to the scientist's lab. Seeing that the beam has been overpowered, the horrified man scientist increases the power again, but Superman uses that against him by twisting the barrel of the weapon into a knot, which keeps the energy from escaping, and the buildup causes the machine to overheat and explode. As the scientist's lab disintegrates with the weapon's demise, the scientist and his pet bird attempt to escape, while Superman arrives to rescue Lois. Superman then captures the scientist just before his lair explodes and takes him to jail, and a newspaper headline reveals the capture of the mad scientist, and the scene resolves back to the Daily Planet building, where Clark and Lois report back to White. And she's written a scoop on the story of the mad scientist with thanks to Superman, and White commends her on doing it. And you see a little picture there of the bird there. And I think if the bird had been running the things instead of the scientist, Superman would have been defeated.
Well, of course.
But that's just me. Like I said, this had a little bit of a plot hole there with the building base not really being repaired. There was no way it was going to stand the way they drew it designed. But, for a 10-minute short, it's fine. You're supposed to have your mind turned off, so to speak, for some of these. You're not supposed to get too nitpicky, I guess. Another thing I thought was interesting was they told the origin story in this. And I'd forgotten that originally Clark was not raised by the Kents.
So had I.
And that he had been in an orphanage his entire childhood, more or less. And I was like, that was kind of weird. And I'm like, is that real? And I had to go look it up and go, well, I guess so. It wasn't something they made just for the cartoon. It was actually what was in Action Comics #1. So I was like, that changes a lot of things, in a way. It kind of explains why the character is the way he was and how it changed as the character evolved. But we'll talk about that at a later time. I'll go ahead and let you read the next one, unless you have some comments on this one.
No, actually, I found out this cartoon was actually nominated for an Oscar for best short subject, and of course, I mean, this is Superman's big screen debut right here.
Yeah.
So, okay.
All right. Episode. Oh well, I'll put it this way. Well, we already said this. Oh, I forgot. I also liked how they mentioned truth and justice, but no mention of the American way in the tagline.
Yep.
And I forget when that was actually added in. It probably when we got post World War II and was doing it during the McCarthy era when it was the live action with George Reeves, I'm guessing, but I don't know. Mm-hmm. Anyway, episode 2.
So episode 2, The Mechanical Monsters, directed by Dave Fleischer, story by Seymour Neidl and Isidore Sparber, based on Superman by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, produced by Max Fleischer, starring Bud Collyer, Joan Alexander, Jackson Beck, production company Fleischer Studios, distributed by Paramount Pictures. Release date November 28th, 1941. Running time 9 minutes. The plot: a robot escapes a robbery and flies into a scientist's secret lair and unloads a pile of cash into a vault. The robot is controlled completely from the scientist's command center, and many robots similar to it are lined up along the walls of the lair. The front page of the Daily Planet reports the robot's robbery right alongside an announcement for the display of $50 million of the world's rarest gems at the local museum. Later, as Lois Lane and Clark Kent are covering the museum's exhibit for the planet, a robot lands in the street outside. The police pelt it with machine gun fire as it marches toward the museum, but the bullets bounce harmlessly off. Museum visitors, including Clark and Lois, flee as the robot marches toward the jewels and begins loading them into an opening in its back. Robot number 5 terrorizes the city in the mechanical monsters. While Clark phones the planet from the nearest phone booth, Lois climbs into the robot's back just as it leaves the museum and takes off into the sky. Clark emerges from the booth, notices Lois gone, and says, "This is a job for Superman." And I'll talk about that line in a minute. He goes back into the phone booth and changes his clothes, emerging in his classic red and blue costume, which is the first time he ever changes in a phone booth, I believe.
Yes, that is correct.
So chasing after robot number 5, he uses his X-ray vision to see Lois trapped inside. When he attempts to stop the robot, it brushes him off, but not without unloading its stolen jewels and almost dropping Lois to her doom. As Superman struggles to free himself from a batch of telecommunication wires he was thrown into, the robot arrives at the lair, but instead of jewels, the scientist finds Lois and its payload. Infuriated, he asks her what she did with the jewels, but she suggests that he, quote, read about it in tomorrow's papers. The next time we see her, she is bound and gagged on a platform held over a pot of boiling metal and part of what appears to be an industrial foundry. The scientist pulls a lever which starts some machinery, gradually lowering her closer and closer to the liquid. Meanwhile, Superman frees himself from the power lines and knocks down the door to the scientist's lair, only to meet the army of robots. Numbers 1 through 27 are seen. Under the scientist's control, the robots emit fire from nozzles positioned on the lower part of their heads, encircle Superman, and pound him with their fists. Initially, the robots seem to have the upper hand, beating Superman to the ground, but Superman defeats them, sending the scientist running. When Superman catches up with him, he is holding a knife to the rope, holding Lois's platform above the molten metal, and threatens to cut it if he takes another step. Superman makes a move, the rope is cut, and Superman speeds across the room to catch Lois just in time, landing on a ledge below the pot of molten metal and the scientist. The scientist then pulls a lever to dump the hot liquid on them, but Superman shields Lois with his cape, then grabs the scientist and flies from the lair to take him and Lois back to the city. The next issue of the Planet details that the robots are destroyed, the jewels are recovered, and the scientist is incarcerated. In the office, Clark says, "That's a wonderful story, Lois." She replies, "Thanks, Clark, but I owe it all to Superman." Clark smiles and winks at the camera. So this film marks the only instance in which Superman is depicted using his X-ray vision in a Fleischer short. Robot number 5 enters the museum and steals the jewels, but when it's flying back to the villain's lair, its number is changed to 13. There were some other scenes where 5 and 13 were flip-flopping back and forth as well. The Mechanical Monsters is the first story from any medium that features Clark Kent using a telephone booth to discard his street clothes and change into Superman. And this plot device would therefore become commonly associated with the character. Silly coppers, robots don't care about your Tommy guns. That was my bad Edward G. Robinson impression.
Yes. So what you think of this episode?
I loved it.
Okay.
And
I'm kind of... Why is Lois so damn dumb? I just, she always gets herself into these situations.
Well, she just can't let Clark Kent get a story now.
Yeah, I know, but it's just like, it's crazy, but oh well,
She's nothing if not a go-getter, that's for sure.
yeah. But you kind of wonder, and this progressively gets worse as the series progresses. And I'll talk about it a little bit more, but I just kind of wonder how the relationship between these two evolved into what it evolved into eventually,
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, we'll go ahead and move on to
But
episode
I'll
three.
also say I actually read, and like one thing I was reminded of while watching these and researching is that this series was really quite influential, like not just on Superman,
Mm-hmm.
but on animation in general. And I found out that Hayao Miyazaki, the famed Japanese animation director of Studio Ghibli, um, in his there was one episode of I think Lupin the Third or something where he was he actually homaged the mechanical robot design in that show, and also in his later film Laputa Castle in the Sky, he pays homage to this episode as well,
Oh,
which
okay.
was cool.
Yeah.
And Castle in the Sky, by the way, is a great film. If any of y'all haven't seen it, it's well worth checking out.
Okay. Episode 3, $1 Billion Limited, directed by Dave Fleischer, story by Seymour Naito and Isidore Sparber, based on Superman by Siegel and Schuster, produced by Max Fleischer, starring Bud Collier, Joan Alexander, and J. X. Beck. Production company Fleischer Studios, distributed by Paramount Pictures, released January 9th for 42, with a running time of 9 minutes. The plot of this episode is the Daily Planet is reporting that the shipment of $1 billion of gold is going to the U.S. Mint. A train is being loaded with hundreds of bars of gold, guarded by several armed police officers. Ooh, police officers. You'd think that with gold they'd have a military presence. Just saying. The locomotive is identical and to the unique one used by the 20th Century Limited, beginning in 1938. In other words, this was an actual train that they did the design off of from real life. Further ahead in the passenger coach, Lois Lane boards with help with Clark Kent, who wishes he could come, but he has another story to cover. As the last of the gold is loaded, a car a few hundred yards away turns on its lights, and the men inside put on robbers' masks and arm themselves. The mysterious car follows the train and almost runs Clark over. At this point, you think, I just got nearly run over. I should just get in the costume and stop the car. But, whatever. The robbers keep going, and they track down the train, and a few of the robbers board the train from the back end of the train, climb to the middle, and separate several cars that carry the guards from the front, leaving them stranded behind. 2 other robbers attack the locomotive at the front, throwing the engineer and a guard overboard, but they also fall off as well, so there's nobody driving the train. Lois, hearing the commotion, climbs to the engine's cab and is like, oh, there's nobody here to run the train. I guess I have to do it. And she's immediately machine gunned at from the robber's car, keeping pace with the train to the side, which is very unlikely, but okay. But one of the robbers had dropped their machine gun in the cab of the engine, so she picks it up and starts firing back at them. Only the bullets bounce off the armored car. Oh, okay. Anyway, Superman's flying, and he arrives on the scene just as the robbers have forced the train onto a track, leading to a boxcar filled with explosives. He manages to rip the track off from the ground and guide the train back to the main track somehow, which doesn't quite work the way they want it to. But yeah, it is what it is. The robbers then demolish a bridge further ahead, which causes the train to fall. But Superman catches the train and places it back on the track, which, again, that's not how physics works, but okay. Finally, the robbers have been thrown a massive, dangerous, silver-colored rocket-shaped bomb into the steam engine's boiler. At this point, Superman Lois manages to pull Lois out of the cab just before the boiler explodes, and both the locomotive and its tender car derail and crash to the ground below the bridge. Superman catches the lead car as it begins to roll backwards, and he pulls the train up the hill himself, only to have the robbers toss several cans of tear gas at him. Coughing and actually being affected by the tear gas, he momentarily loses control and begins to have the train slip out of his hands, but he regains control and marches steadily up the hill despite the robbers' continued machine gun fire. Eventually, he pulls the train at his full speed over several miles and brings it to a safe stop at its destination at the U.S. Mint. The next day, Lois has another byline for the Daily Planet. Reading the article, Clark says, "Uncanny how Superman turns up just when you need him." Lois replies, "I didn't even get a chance to thank him." And Clark smiles. I'm, like I said, there's a lot of things in this one that was like, a little bit weird and wonky. But again, these are cartoons that are, 8 to 10 minutes long, and it's about the action more so than getting the physics right or the facts right, so to speak. So, and again, this was done in the 40s. People don't necessarily think of all the different science stuff that we think about now because we were educated differently. So that makes a difference as well. But I do think that it's funny how Lois can operate the train. She can pilot an aircraft by herself. She knows how to fire machine guns. It's like, okay.
Yeah, like I said, she's a go-getter.
Yeah.
That's cool. I don't have any specific comments on this one. A lot of my comments will be on like the collective cartoons.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and. I did think at least there was the tear gas grenades. I mean, it showed a smidge of vulnerability for him, and that's when Superman was actually cool, when he wasn't invincible.
Yes.
There was things that could stop him, or at least, temporarily
slow him down
or something. Yeah. And that I felt was interesting that they did that. These days, it'd be like, tear gas? Knock everybody else out with the tear gas themselves, But, it is what it is. All right, 4th episode.
The Arctic Giant. Directed by Dave Fleischer, story by Bill Turner and Ted Pierce. Based on Superman by Siegel and Schuster, produced by Max Fleischer, starring Bud Collyer, Joan Alexander, Jackson Beck, Julian Noah, Fleischer Studios, Paramount Pictures, February 27th, 1942, running time 9 minutes. The plot. The story begins as the narrator tells about an Arctic giant found frozen in perfect condition millions of years ago in Siberia. The monster is shipped to the Museum of Natural Science in Metropolis, where it is kept frozen using special refrigeration equipment. The people look at the giant monster in the museum. Although the nameplate on the monster's case says Tyrannosaurus, the dinosaur-like monster does not look like an actual Tyrannosaurus, being green-colored with an upward posture, large arms, and plantigrade feet. So it may be possible that they thought it was a Tyrannosaurus, but it was something else. Lois Lane is sent to do a story on the monster because it is possible that if the ice were to thaw, it might still be alive. As she is leaving the Daily Planet, Clark asks if she wants him to come with her, but Lois says, no thanks, you'd probably faint if you saw the monster. You scare so easily. Then, once she leaves the room, Clark says, maybe she's right, but Superman hasn't fainted yet. Of course, the refrigeration equipment loses power after an accident, a serious oversight on the engineer's part, I might add. Sleeping Dino wakes up and goes on a rampage. Lois tries to call the planet and gets buried beneath a mountain of rubble that should kill her. Back at the planet, Perry White orders Clark to get to the museum. Changing to Superman, he bounds from building to building because, again, he can't fly yet. Gets there, removes the rubble, and Lois stands up with nary a scratch. Aren't cartoons wonderful?
Yeah, I hated that. That's all.
He tells her to go back to the planet, which of course she ignores. As Superman goes to fight with Goofzilla, he has to stop different threats the monster has created, including a flood from a broken dam. Lois somehow not only beats Superman to the monster, but she managed to stop at the planet and pick up a camera. And again, this is the 40s. Cameras did not fit in your pocket the way they do now. She somehow gets into a tall building, tall enough to be face to face with Tyranno Doofus. I just love this.
I hate that dinosaur design. I'm sorry.
Who promptly takes her in its mouth and is going to eat her, but naturally Soups rescues her. He admonishes her and then goes back to finish off the monster, which they then promptly leave in Metropolis Zoo, just chained down because, of course.
Yeah, I mean, it was just, this is frankly a crappy episode. I mean, it makes no sense. I'm sorry if you've got a giant dinosaur like that, you don't put him in the zoo. You take him to an island. You go find Jurassic Island and put him where he can't get in any trouble with anything. Yeah. All you're asking for is more trouble. You just the zoo. I mean, what the hell? And like I said, Lois just does the stupidest things.
Yep.
Yeah. But
and you mentioned Goofzilla, and I've actually heard speculation basically from the internet as to whether or not this actually was an inspiration for Godzilla.
I don't know about that. That's interesting. Let's see.
Now, I haven't found anything definitively saying it was or it wasn't.
No, but I mean that's actually interesting because I thought Godzilla was older than it is, for one thing. But yeah, Godzilla did come after this, so that is a possibility. That's interesting. Okay. Have to look more into that. But it would have been interesting if the character had some, like lightning blast or something, as a dinosaur or something. But I mean, they drew the dinosaur. He had this goofy looking face. He had almost no teeth in his mouth. It's like, I mean, I realize you're trying to do a cartoon that's not offensive and not terrifying for children in the 40s, and they had a different code back then and stuff. But at the same time, I was like, really? I mean, it just opens her mouth and she just happens to fall in his mouth. It's not like he, grabbed her with his teeth or anything. Of course, if he did, then it'd be like chomp done. But still, just I don't know. It was there, but it was one of the lesser written stories, in my opinion. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Oh, by the way, I still say I can't see how any sane person would fall in love with Lois. She's just but anyway, episode 5 is The Bulleteers, directed by Dave Fleischer, written by Bill Turner and Colm Meyer, based on Superman by Siegel and Schuster, produced by Max Fleischer, starring voice talents by Collier, Joan Alexander, Julian Noah, and Jackson Beck. Production company Fleischer Studios, distributed by Paramount. March 27th, 1942 release date, with a running time of only 8 minutes. The budgets were getting tighter, folks. To do shorter episodes. Criminals have developed a special bullet car that they can make crimes with. Shaped like a bullet with expendable and retractable wings, so that it can fly like a plane as well. There's not much more to it than that. Lois sneaks aboard the vehicle during a heist, and when she figures out what's going on, she smashes the controls for all the good it does, because the vehicle remains unaffected and they operate it just fine, even though she smashed the hell out of the controls with a wrench. She gets captured, and she's in the car with the criminals when Superman has to stop them and rescue intrepid idiot reporter Lois. I'm sorry. I just, that's how I look at it. She should have, you smashed the thing, leave,
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just going to keep smashing. Oh, crap, they're here. I better hide. But, and like I said, it didn't affect the vehicle at all.
Yeah.
He just drove away like nothing was going on. It's like, what? If that story had been written correctly, they would have got in, seen the vehicle was destroyed by her actions. She'd have been presented as a hero of a sort, but then she's got herself in trouble. They've got her. He shows up and rescues her from the men that are going to, end her,
Mm-hmm.
But you don't have to do the whole nonsense of, what they do, but they do it because it's more exciting. It's more exciting for him to have to go out and fly after the machine as a plane and rip the roof off of it and all this other stuff. And it's like, be realistic. That's just me, though, I guess. But are you the same way on that, or?
I agree with you. I do.
Yeah. Alrighty. Our next one is Magnetic Telescope. You want to read it, or do you want me to?
I'll do it. Magnetic Telescope, directed by Dave Fleischer, story by Dan Gordon and Carl Meyer, Siegel, Schuster, Max Fleischer, same voice cast,
same production. Just go release
the plot. The story begins with Clark Kent and Lois Lane, along with the entire town, observing a scientist who resembles Marvel's nemesis Dr. Sivana, demonstration of his magnetic telescope. A giant U-shaped magnet connected to the telescope is pointed at a comet and turned on, drawing the comet towards the observers. Something goes wrong, however, and the comet crashes into the town, rolls through the streets, and then tumbles into the ocean nearby. Newspapers the next day report the disaster, and the police are shown arguing with the scientist, who claims the importance of his work is worth the risk of human lives. The police say, as Lois looks on, that they will stop any attempt to try the experiment again, but the scientist refuses to quit, reminding them that any attempt to stop him could prove disastrous. He runs into his telescope room and shuts the door before the police can stop him and begins his experiment again. Just as the magnet pulls the comet into Earth's gravitational pull, the police jam a piece of metal into the electric generator running his machine and cut its main wires with axes. The comet, now out of the scientist's control, hurtles toward the town in a bright circle of light. As the police and scientists flee, Lois calls the Daily Planet from the scientist building, reporting the impending disaster as the building crumbles around her and pins her. Clark happens to be standing nearby and takes a cab to get to the telescope. As he nears the building, pieces of the comet destroy the road in front of them and the cabbie flees. Clark takes this opportunity to change clothes in the back of the car, becoming Superman. Superman saves Lois from the rubble of comet shards and then streaks toward the hurtling comet, striking at full force, but he bounces off, delaying the inevitable only slightly. While Superman lies unconscious, more comet shards crush buildings, cars, and trains across the town. Superman awakes and flies at the comet again, but with similar results, falling into the telescope's generator room. He notices the metal bar in the generator and removes it, then winds some cable around its rod and pulls, sending the generator into motion. He then completes the circuit to the scope by grabbing both ends of the cut wire and allowing the electric current to run through his chest from arm to arm. Lois sets the machine to reverse and the comet is sent back into space just in time. Superman's silhouette appears in the telescope control room and Lois kisses him. Much to her chagrin, the silhouette is actually Clark.
Very dumb episode. A magnet that strong would ruin the Earth's electromagnetic field and destroy the planet. And also, if a full comet hit like it does, it would not bounce like a beach ball. It would impact like the one that wiped out the dinosaurs. Very bad writing. I'm sorry. This is stuff that even... I realize that, again, this was done in the 40s. Maybe they didn't have the science knowledge that we do now. But I know that the average person didn't have it because it wasn't taught. But I don't know. It just seems like that was common sense stuff to me, that they should know better. But it's there, you know.
Yeah, I will say what was funny is we watched these on YouTube, and after watching each one, I scrolled down to read some of the comments for what people were saying, and
I didn't have where I watched it. The comments were shut off, so there was no comments.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but go ahead.
But about half the comment section was going, yeah, Superman finally got some sugar. And I burst out laughing when I read that.
Okay. Oh, boy. but he didn't, because it wasn't him. It was Clark that she kissed. Oh, it's you. Yeah. Hi. Thank you. It's that Superman got it. It's Clark got it, you know. But anyway. Yeah, I don't know. That episode was just kind of weird. Again, she gets trapped under a collapsing building that would crush her. Nothing wrong with her. Just get the stuff off me. I'm okay. It's like, not everybody's from Krypton, guys. Break a leg or something on her, but do something that says she actually got hurt, But anyway, episode 7, Electric Earthquake. This story is by Seymour Knightle and Isidore Barber. The same everything else. May 15th, 1942, 8 minutes runtime. A Native American scientist tells Perry White, Clark Kent, and Lois Lane that Manhattan Island must be returned to the Indians or else. When he is scoffed at by White, the scientist leaves, but Lois suspects something is off and follows him. She sneaks aboard his motorboat to a secluded hideout where he discovers her watching in the reflection of his elevator to his underwater laboratory. He invites her to his lair and then, of course, traps her and then shows her his weapon of destruction. The lab has giant conductor wires laid out across the seafloor with enough charge to cause earthquakes. The scientist then begins blowing up Manhattan. The Daily Planet building gets rattled, giving Clark time to change into Superman. He somehow figures the problem is out at sea. Don't know how he figures it out, but he dives in the water and he sees all the wiring. He begins to disconnect them, gets shocked, then he gets blown up and knocked out. He should have drowned at this point, but he comes to, and he eventually breaks all the wires and into the lab. He does have to come up once for air, though. Just once, but he did have to come up for air. The lab is now flooding, and the scientist escapes, leaving Lois to drown as she's strapped into the chair. Superman, being a moron, chases the villain, who catches him, and then he has to go back and save Lois, who should have already drowned by this point, because the speed that the water's rushing in, it just no. But he gets to her in time and rescues her, and the villain's taken off on his speedboat, but of course Superman's so fast, even dragging Lois behind, that he catches him and just comes out from underneath the water and lifts the boat with one hand out of the water while he's holding her. Okay, that was that episode. What'd you think of that one?
Well, apparently the Daily Planet's in Manhattan now instead of Metropolis.
Yes.
So.
And of course, a little bit afterwards, they're on a boat and they're in the ocean saying, and Clark says, doesn't it look as good as ever or whatever, and of course, Lois says, yes, thanks to Superman. Well, whatever. Did Superman also go off camera and rebuild the whole thing that got blown up?
But I will say one thing I did like, the way they handled the Native American character. Well, it's like they could have very easily made him a stereotypical character.
I think he did.
Really?
Yeah, I do. They didn't. What they needed to do with that was make the character somewhat sympathetic, because there is a valid argument there, and instead of blowing him off. And they should have done something where Lois understands his point, but you don't have to do this to make your point type conversation should have happened, I think, where the character would have been at least a little bit sympathetic, but instead they just kind of made him one-dimensional to me. But then all their villains are pretty one-dimensional on the show. So it's
like they could have taken it a lot further, and
well, they certainly do with other races in this show.
Yes.
So in that regard, I understand where you're coming from, but I think that was more lack of knowing what to do. I mean, what are you going to say with a Native American scientist? I mean, yes, I will use my tomahawk ray against you. The scientist throws a tomahawk at Superman and bounces off his chest. I don't know. There's not much there to be done. But yeah, I would have, if they were going to do that, they should have done a little bit more explaining of that, which you're not going to be able to do in 8 minutes. So I was kind of about that myself. Okay, the next episode is called Volcano.
Let's see. Do we have a slide? Oh, there we go. All right. A narrator describes Mount Mauna Kea, a volcano which has been dormant for about 300 years. On this peaceful island, crowned by the great volcano, Mount Mauna Kea, occurred the mightiest eruption that ever shook the earth, burying the beautiful city beneath it in molten lava and creating tidal waves that raced around the world. For 300 years, this mighty volcano lay dormant. A new and more beautiful city sprang up at its base. But now, after centuries of inactivity, slight tremors are being felt. At the Bureau of Meteorology, a group of scientists watchfully check delicate instruments to determine the seriousness of this renewed activity. And of course, it's starting to wake up and will erupt. Lois Lane and Clark Kent are sent to the scene by Perry White, who gives each of them steam tickets to the island, as well as press passes, ordering Lois to keep them safe as she stows them in her purse.
Stop for a second. For those who don't understand what Mount Mauna Kea is, this is basically the island of Hawaii. So now they're in Manhattan. They had to take a steamship to Hawaii. You know how long that would take? Oh, man. Why not fly them? That would make more sense, but, but go ahead, go from there.
On arrival, Clark cannot find his press pass. Surprise, surprise, Lois has it hidden in her purse, even after she had been ordered by White to stop getting a good story all by herself and let Clark help her for a change, which we all know isn't going to happen, and goes into town to acquire another as Lois takes a tour of the volcano. Her guide tells her that the plan to save the city is to blow a hole in the side of the volcano, thus altering the course of the lava flow away from the town to sea. But of course, while this is going on, the volcano erupts, putting everyone in peril. Clark has to change to Superman, find a way to stop the lava from getting to town, save Lois, aka and then try to get the plan to explode the volcano so the lava goes out to sea to work. He manages this, but not without some difficulty. Of course, Lois gets to write all about it, and Clark sees his press pass in her purse and goads her about it.
Yep. Yeah. So,
Yeah, I will say I do like that.
This is the point. When you keep having Lois do stuff like this, why would they ever become a couple? Wouldn't you hate a person that did that to you all the time?
Yep. I surely would.
So it's like I can't understand how this relationship between these two evolved into what they became later on, other than fanboy shipment. Just going, well, we want them together as the writers. I don't know.
But I like in this episode that there was no villain,
right?
That it was Superman against nature, and the crew actually really helped him out. So that was nice to see.
Yeah. But I just it's funny, she gets herself in trouble again, and I can climb up the wooden planks and the wooden scaffold is burning to the ground from the lava. Oh crap! Okay, now what do I do? Oh, I guess I'm going to go hand over the cable, dangling hundreds of feet over lava. I'm like, I'm thinking Lois wouldn't do that. She'd be going, my nails. Yeah, But yeah, of course, what do I know? I guess that's why they had to make her an army brat with a general for a father to make her tough. They don't do that in the cartoon. They do this much later in the comics. But I'm how else could you imagine her doing all this stuff she does in this show? She's more super than Superman at times. But okay, last one for this episode is Terror on the Midway, story by Dan Gordon and Jay Morton. Everything else pretty much the same. Release date August 30th, 1942, with a run time of 9 minutes. Lois has to cover a circus where an escaped giant ape causes havoc, and Superman has to rescue her and capture numerous dangerous animals that have escaped: big cats, elephants, and the ape. He saves Lois from a fire as well. There's not much more to say about that. There's a little baby monkey that basically causes the problem of the release of the big ape. That's what happens when you hire a drunk as the organ grinder. The monkey escapes and causes major problems. And whoever the organ grinder was, he wasn't appearing in the cartoon, was probably sent off to work as a geek elsewhere else. But anyway,
he was born for it.
He was born for it. Yeah. But yeah, it's an okay episode. Again, there's no villain per se. It's just a set of weird circumstances that happen, like one thing after another. I don't know. It was interesting that he tried to, he as Clark, he tries to do certain things, and then he tries to help the others stop the ape, and then he gets tossed aside and pretend, that was a little bit of a weird scene, but okay, I guess that's better than, just tackling the ape by yourself in your double-breasted suit and hat, right? But it was, it was a reasonably well done episode. I didn't see anything wrong with it in terms of the story logic. Obviously, when things go hectic and the animals get upset and everything, a lot of them can break free. So, okay, he stops and walks up the other animals. That's fine. So it was there.
There's one scene of Lois that I like, and it's when she sees that there's this little girl that's going to get trampled by the ape, and she actually drops her camera and helps the little girl, which I thought was a nice touch.
Yeah, that's true.
And I wonder, and this is just me, I wonder if this was any influence on Titano later on.
Maybe. I don't know. That's an interesting possibility. Yeah, it's hard to say because the writers for the animated show are completely separate from anything that was going on in the comics, because Siegel and Schuster were still doing the comics at this time, I believe. And so it's I could be wrong about that, but I know that they had nothing to do with the comics. So if the comics people did it was like years later that these guys influenced them. So but that pretty much concludes our talk for this evening. Again, that's basically because I just didn't have time to write up reviews on the other 8 episodes. But we'll get to them next week. Again, and there'll be part 2 on February 18th at 8 p.m.
Well, so I've got some things that I'd love to say just about the series in general.
Sure.
So one thing I discovered is that the Fleischers actually did not want to make this series at all.
Right.
Because at the time they were doing the Popeye cartoons. They had already done Betty Boop. They had done their first feature film, Gulliver's Travels, and I think they were working on a second one. But um, they said they didn't want to overextend themselves, and to their credit, they were smart enough to realize that if they were going to animate a Superman cartoon, it could not be animated like a Popeye cartoon. It's
Mm-hmm.
like it would need to be more realistic, which they hadn't done anything like that at the time.
Well, they had, because Gulliver's Travels was
Well, true,
but there's a difference between Gulliver because of the color palettes. The color palette for Gulliver was much lighter in tone than the Superman stuff, because a lot of Superman stuff was done at night. The storylines take place at night.
Yeah.
Obviously, this actually had a lot of effect on Bruce Timm and what would later become the Batman Art Deco look in the 90s. That's all based on this stuff.
So they didn't want to do it, but like they didn't want to outright reject Paramount. So they said, okay, we'll do it, but we feel that in order to do it correctly, like each episode's going to have to cost $100,000, or like they tried to make it so like Paramount would say, oh, that's too expensive. Like basically Paramount would have to reject them instead of they rejecting Paramount.
Right.
And to their shock, Paramount agreed. And I've heard differing accounts of what the budget actually was. It was like anywhere from 50,000 to 90,000 per episode. But they say that even today, adjusted for inflation, this is the highest budgeted, or one of the highest budgeted cartoon series ever made. And
keep in mind, they only had 2 animators per show. They didn't have full teams. So, or if they did, they only credited 2 animators.
Yeah, I think they did. It's just only the leads were credited.
Yeah.
So my general thought on this series is, story-wise, yes, you can nitpick it till the cows come home,
Sure.
And justifiably so. But animation-wise, and especially
animation is beautiful for what it is.
Considering that these are 80 years old, and the animators, like, they really pushed themselves, like, and especially if you compare it to the Popeye cartoons and the Betty Boop cartoons from the time, I mean, you can easily see where that money went. And it's like,
the only thing I don't like is the design for Lois, particularly her eyes. The eyes just look weird to me. Like they're not centered. They're like rolled. It's like sometimes she looks like her eyes are rolled back upwards. Sometimes, and so that makes her look a little bit off to me. But otherwise, pretty well done overall.
Yep. In fact, I've got a book here in my collection, The History of Animation by Charles Solomon, and in it actually has, I don't know how well you can see this, but that is an original model sheet for Lois Lane.
Can't see it very well. You'll have to send me a photo. You don't have a scanner, do you?
I can take a picture of it and send it.
Yeah, take a picture of it and send it to me. We'll show it next week.
Undeniably, the series is gorgeously animated, and even with all the nitpicks and story stuff,
I happen to be a story guy. That's me.
Well, yeah, but for me, it's like it is mainly due to the animation. Like, these cartoons are exciting to watch.
Sure.
Like these excite me more than any other Superman movie or TV show. Like I just
I don't know about that, but
I guess, and I guess I can.
I think part of the reason you say that though is because, like I said, he's more vulnerable in these.
Yeah.
He does get knocked down. He does get. It's not like everything is easy for him in these. But this again is the very early Superman. This is not the Superman that we came to know. That's basically invincible unless there's kryptonite around. So
that was interesting. Like being reminded of that, and of course, he doesn't have his heat vision, and he doesn't have his icy breath, and
he only leaps tall buildings until about halfway through he starts to fly. And whether that has to do with what was going on in the comics at the time, or they just thought
they basically thought that after taking a good look at it, they just thought it didn't look good, and it. I agree with them on that, because in the couple of episodes where you do see him bounding from place to place, and they asked permission from, what was it, National at the time, comics pub. They asked permission to allow him to fly, and they got it, and that's how Superman came to fly.
Oh, okay.
And of course, it introduces the famous phrase, faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive, able to leap tall buildings in a single bound.
But then they turn around and do, quicker than a flash of lightning and stronger than the pound of the surf. And I'm like, oh, good God. Mightier than a windstorm, hurricane. I'm like, no, get rid of that. We didn't get to those. Those were in the latter half after Famous Studios takes over. The thing is, it's not so much that the Fleischers stopped producing these. They were still involved, but they weren't the primary anymore. Let me see here if I can call it back up here.
Because what I heard is after Terror on the Midway, and due to several things at play, the Fleischer brothers actually got fired by Paramount. So those two, the Fleischer brothers, actually didn't work on the rest of the cartoons, but their studio and their crew members folded into Famous Studios, and they continued them.
Right. When we get into this more, let's see here. Basically, the writers started directing. Yeah. And it was produced by Sam Buchwald, most of the stuff. But
and I have to say, you're a story guy, I'm a musician, and one thing I like is there's actually not a whole lot of dialogue in these cartoons.
Like a lot of it is dramatic music.
Yes, which I loved. I love that. It wasn't inundated with dialogue, and the music really drove a lot of the action, which I love. I love the fact that
the music drive the action, or did the action drive the music?
Well, they probably maybe drove each other. But I like that the music score was front and center, which you
Mhm.
don't always get in cartoons.
Right. Yeah, that's something we'll talk more about next week when we talk about the differences, because there is a difference from the Fleischer stuff to the famous stuff.
Mhm.
There's more, for one thing, there's more people involved in the music than there was in famous versions, and there's a little bit of clash in style, I think, in some of those. But you know, that's kind of the thing that we end up talking about when we get into the latter half of the line. But yeah, it's pretty much the same. All the writers were doing the first ones that we've been talking about: Seymour Nightel, Isidore Sparber, Jay Morton. These other guys are the ones that are producing and directing from it. Like you say, the Fleischers themselves seem to be separate from it. So we'll see how much of a difference that makes next week. Alrighty then. We want to thank you all for watching this episode of Quoth the Raven, Lewis Bright Raven. And if you see next week, part 2 at 8 p.m., we'll finish up our discussion on this topic. And then on the 25th, I guess we'll do one of John's preferred horror films, Crimson Peak. And that'll be what our next 2 episodes of the weekend movie review will be. If you enjoyed this video, then we appreciate it if you'd share, like, subscribe to the channel to continue to get content from this channel. As always, I thank you for watching and for your support. You want to reach out to me with topics you want, your thoughts on these episodes, or on the Fleischer Superman in general. Lewis.BrightRaven at Facebook, at LewisBrightRaven2 at Twitter. You can see some of my artwork at deviantart.com/BrightRaven. You've been watching Quoth the Raven, Lewis Bright Raven, exclusively on YouTube. You can email me at quoththeravenlbr72@gmail.com. I'll get back to you. Try Lewis Bright Raven at yahoo.com. And if you want to reach out to John, it's Grey, Grey, Figaro, Figaro at hotmail.com.
Yep.
And that's it for the night. So we'll see you probably Monday or Tuesday is my next show. I think. I know next week I've got at least one interview and then another one after that. So we're getting new guests on the show again, and discussing new crowdfunding products next week. So there we go. That's next week. And then we'll also try and get caught up on the, backlog of books I've got to read and review. And do some drawing, too. So lots of stuff to do. Until then, have a good night. We'll see you next week.
Good night, everyone.